There's something curious that's rarely taught to men. Often it's not a lack of intelligence that destroys a life. It's small behavioral traps that go unnoticed. Seemingly simple things, responding to a provocation, trying to please everyone, seeking validation, justifying every decision. Most people do this without realizing it. But those who observe history, who study thinkers like Machiavelli, begin to see a very clear pattern. Men who accumulate power, influence, and respect are not necessarily the strongest or the loudest. In fact, they are often the quietest, the most strategic, those who deeply understand human nature. They know that social life is, to a large extent, an invisible game of perception, reputation, and emotional control. And here's a statement that might bother many people. A large number of men destroy their own worth by constantly trying to prove it. It seems contradictory, but that's exactly how it works. The more someone tries to convince the world that they deserve respect, the more they convey the feeling that they don't yet possess it. Machiavelli already observed that power rarely belongs to those who react impulsively. It belongs to those who understand when to act, and especially when not to act. In other words, there's a huge difference between real strength and performative strength. And unfortunately, most men learn this in the most painful way possible, after losing opportunities, relationships, or reputation. In this video, you'll understand 7 silent traps that wise men learn to avoid. Some of them seem harmless. Others are so common that almost everyone believes they are normal behaviors. But when you begin to see them clearly, something completely changes in how you position yourself in the world. Because strategy is not manipulation. It's awareness of human reality. And when you understand these dynamics, you begin to play a very different game than most people even realize exists. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now, not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder you are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There's a curious detail about truly powerful men. They rarely engage in public debates to prove they're right. This seems counterintuitive to many. After all, when someone challenges us, the natural reaction is to want to respond with the same intensity, defend our ego, and show that we are right. But those who have studied strategy a little, and here Machiavelli's thinking plays a significant role, understand that the real game doesn't happen in the emotional realm. It happens in the realm of perception. A strategic man understands that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires observing the scenario before acting. Instead of reacting impulsively, he analyzes, does this discussion really increase my power, or does it just fuel the spectacle? Think of business leaders or major investors. You rarely see them arguing in social media comments. They know that often entering the public arena is falling into an ego trap, and whoever controls their ego controls the game. The central point is simple. Those who react emotionally give power to their opponent. Those who respond calmly redefine the dynamics of the situation. Machiavelli spoke extensively about the appearance of virtue, appearing balanced, thoughtful, rational. This doesn't mean being passive. It means using strategy. Imagine a common scenario. Someone at work tries to provoke you in a meeting, questioning your decision in front of everyone. The unprepared person reacts immediately, raises their voice, tries to prove they are right. The result? they lose authority. The strategic person, however, uses something much more powerful: silence, a pause, and a calculated response. They might say something simple like, "Interesting point. Let's analyze this with data after the meeting." That's it. They didn't engage in emotional conflict, but they also didn't back down. This is the calculated use of force. It's understanding that leadership isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about maintaining control when everyone else is losing. Another aspect that few realize is that arguing too much in public can damage your reputation. Strategic men understand that reputation is an invisible asset. Machiavelli spoke of virtù and fortuna, the combination of skill and opportunity. A leader with virtù knows that every action communicates something. When he engages in trivial arguments, he reduces his own perceived value. It's like a general abandoning the main battlefield to argue with random soldiers. It makes no sense. Therefore, powerful men carefully choose where they expend their energy. They know that decisions based on real human nature show that many people argue only for attention or validation. By not engaging in this game, they preserve their authority. Ultimately, this also helps to avoid being hated, because explosive reactions often create unnecessary enemies. And curiously, this posture reveals another silent trap that brings down many intelligent men: the constant need to explain every decision they make. There's a silent difference between clarity and excessive justification. Strategic men understand this very early on. Those who spend too much time trying to explain every decision end up revealing something they wouldn't want to: insecurity. Look, explaining when necessary is intelligence. But justifying everything all the time is something else entirely. When someone feels they need to convince the whole world that they are right, they end up showing that they depend on the approval of others. And in the game of influence, something Machiavelli understood deeply: dependence is weakness. A man who acts based on decisions grounded in real human nature knows that people respect more those who demonstrate calm conviction. He communicates what is necessary and moves on, without long speeches, without trying to convince everyone. Because in practice, politics guided by reality, not by ideals, shows that trying to please everyone rarely generates respect. In fact, it often generates the opposite. Think about high-level leaders. A CEO decides to change a company's strategy. He explains the overall direction, shows the key data, and that's it. He doesn't spend weeks justifying every detail to every person in the organization. Because leadership requires something essential: confidence in one's own decision. This connects directly to the idea of virtù and fortuna. Virtù is the ability to act firmly in the face of uncertainty. Fortuna refers to the circumstances that arise. Those who master virtù understand that some decisions will never have universal approval, and that's okay. Imagine a simple example. A man decides to focus more on his career and reduce social outings for a few months. If he starts explaining this to every friend, every colleague, every person who questions it, he enters a spiral of validation. Now, imagine another approach. He simply says, "I'm focused on some projects now," and continues on his way. Short, clear, and firm. This is the calculated use of force. Not physical force, but psychological force. Another important detail is that over-explaining opens the door to endless questioning. When you provide excessive justifications, people feel entitled to judge your choices. This creates a curious dynamic. You become the defendant in an invisible court. Machiavelli warned about something very practical. Sometimes it's better to maintain the appearance of virtue than to try to prove absolute purity in every move. In other words, those who speak less make fewer mistakes. This doesn't mean being mysterious on purpose, but rather preserving authority. Great leaders, strategists, and commanders have always understood this. They didn't need to defend every decision because their results spoke for themselves. And this also helps avoid being hated because endless debates often escalate into personal conflicts. Interestingly, when someone learns to speak less and act more, another even more dangerous trap arises: the human tendency to react emotionally when provoked or insulted. There is a silent test that life constantly applies to men: provocation. Sometimes it appears in the form of criticism, other times as irony or even a direct insult. Most people react immediately. Emotion rises, the response comes quickly, and that's it. The escalation begins. But strategic men know something that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Whoever controls their own reaction controls the situation. In the real world, power rarely lies with whoever speaks loudest, but rather with whoever maintains composure when the atmosphere becomes tense. This is part of a politics guided by reality, not by ideals. The reality is simple. Many conflicts exist only because someone decided to react. When a man responds calmly, he completely changes the game. It's like taking oxygen away from a fire. The confrontation loses strength. The provocateur loses the stage. And whoever remains calm gains something much more valuable: silent respect. Now consider a common scenario. Someone tries to belittle you in front of other people. It could be a co-worker, an acquaintance, even someone on social media. The automatic reaction would be to retaliate with the same intensity, but a strategic man understands the calculated use of force. Sometimes the greatest demonstration of strength is simply not reacting. Imagine a meeting where someone criticizes your idea with a provocative tone. The emotional man interrupts, defends himself, argues. The strategic man listens, pauses, and responds with something simple. Interesting. Let's analyze the numbers later. That's all. No emotion, no tension. It seems small, but the psychological impact is enormous. This type of posture builds something that Machiavelli valued highly: a reputation for self-control. And reputation, in the game of influence, functions as an invisible shield. People begin to realize that provoking you doesn't generate the spectacle they expected. There's also a deep psychological dimension to this. Many provocations are, in fact, unconscious attempts to gauge your balance. It's like a social radar. When someone realizes they can easily throw you off balance, you become a recurring target. On the other hand, when someone perceives that you maintain emotional stability, the dynamic changes. This is linked to the concept of decisions based on real human nature. Human nature respects those who demonstrate inner control. It's not about being cold or distant, it's about choosing when to act. Machiavelli also reminded us that a leader needs to avoid being hated, and explosive reactions often create unnecessary resentment. Those who understand this learn to transform silence into strategy. And curiously, when a man masters his reactions, he begins to perceive another subtle risk: the constant desire for the approval of the crowd. There's a psychological trap that ensnares many intelligent men without them realizing it: the constant need for approval. At first, it seems harmless. After all, everyone likes recognition. Everyone likes to hear they're on the right track. But the problem begins when this validation becomes emotional fuel. When someone starts making decisions based on applause, likes, praise, or social acceptance, something subtle happens. They lose autonomy. And this is where Machiavelli's strategic thinking becomes extremely relevant. He understood that leadership requires one fundamental thing: psychological independence. A man who depends on the approval of the crowd does not lead the crowd. He is guided by it. Therefore, a policy guided by reality, not by ideals, requires recognizing something uncomfortable. Most people don't know what they really want and often change their minds quickly. See how this plays out in practice. Imagine a man who wants to start a project, opening a business, changing careers, launching a channel, investing in something new. Before even acting, he asks the opinion of 10 different people. Each one gives a different answer. One says it's risky. Another says it's a waste of time. Another says it's too late. The result? He freezes. This happens because he placed control of his own direction in the hands of the crowd. Strategic men do the opposite. They listen to advice, yes, but they make decisions based on real human nature and their own long-term vision. This is a clear example of virtù and fortuna. Virtù is the courage to act even when approval is not yet available. Fortuna is the opportunities that arise precisely for those who had this initial courage. Great entrepreneurs, leaders, and strategists have always faced criticism at the beginning. And curiously, many of those who criticize them later appear to say that they always believed in them. Another important point is that constantly seeking approval causes a man to lose something extremely valuable: mystery and authority. When someone explains everything, asks permission for everything, and seeks validation for every step, he reduces his own social weight. Machiavelli spoke about maintaining an appearance of virtue and acting firmly when necessary. This also involves understanding that sometimes it is better to be respected than constantly approved. The famous idea that it is better to be feared than loved does not mean living by intimidating people. It means something deeper. Respect comes from the consistency of your decisions, not from trying to please everyone at the same time. And when a man stops desperately seeking approval, he notices something curious. Some people begin to react with resistance, provocation, or even contempt. And this reveals another, even more dangerous trap: when the wounded ego tries to respond desperately to regain value. There's a delicate moment in many men's lives when personal value begins to be confused with immediate acceptance. This happens especially in social and romantic relationships. When someone enters the so-called zone of desperation, they start acting driven by the anxiety of being validated. They send too many messages, try to impress at every moment, chase attention, and over-explain their intentions. And ironically, the more they try to demonstrate value, the more their perceived value diminishes. This is one of the most interesting paradoxes of human nature, something Machiavelli would easily understand by observing the dynamics of power. In any social environment, whether politics, business, or personal relationships, the perception of value is linked to scarcity and emotional stability. When someone demonstrates an excessive need for approval, they communicate something involuntary, a lack of internal control. And in the world of strategy, politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that perception often matters more than intention. Imagine a common situation. A man meets someone who sparks his interest. Instead of maintaining a balanced demeanor, he begins to act as if he constantly needs to prove his worth. He sends messages non-stop, tries to arrange dates all the time, showers praise excessively, and tries to impress with stories and promises. On the other side, the perception quickly changes. What could be interest begins to seem like pressure. This behavior breaks something essential, the natural dynamic of curiosity and discovery. Strategic men understand that true value doesn't need to be constantly announced. This is linked to the concept of virtù and fortuna. Virtù, here is the ability to maintain presence, calm, and confidence. Fortuna refers to the opportunities that arise when the environment perceives this stability. In other words, those who rush too much often seem to be running away from something, or trying to prove something they haven't yet built. Another point Machiavelli observed in politics also appears in human relations. Excessive effort can generate contempt. This connects to the idea of avoiding being hated, but also of avoiding being devalued. A man who demonstrates emotional balance conveys a silent message of strength. He doesn't need to beg for attention because his life already has direction. He has projects, ambitions, goals. He understands the calculated use of force, in this case, psychological force. Sometimes the most powerful gesture is simply to continue living one's own path without chasing immediate validation. This creates something curious, respect, and respect naturally generates social attraction. But to maintain this kind of posture, there is an even more decisive factor: the environment in which a man lives, because nobody maintains a strategic mindset for very long when surrounded by people who think small. Few things shape a man's destiny as much as the people who surround him daily. This isn't just a motivational phrase, it's an observable reality in virtually any human environment. Think of groups of friends, work teams, social circles. Within minutes of being together, it's possible to perceive the predominant mental pattern of that group. There are environments where conversations revolve around growth, learning, projects, and ideas. And there are environments where energy is consumed by complaints, gossip, criticism, and constant distractions. Machiavelli, who deeply observed human nature, knew that leadership requires rigorous control of the environment. A strategic leader understands that their mind needs to be surrounded by stimuli that strengthen their vision, not weaken it. Therefore, decisions based on real human nature show that the selection of companions is not arrogance, it's strategy. Imagine two different scenarios. In the first, a man spends a great deal of time with people who constantly criticize everything, mock those who try to grow, and ridicule any ambition. Whenever someone talks about starting a project, someone always says, "That won't work, they've tried that before. It's a waste of time." Over time, this environment creates a kind of mental numbness. The person begins to doubt themselves even before trying. Now imagine another environment. People discuss ideas, share books, talk about investments, business or learning. A friend mentions reading Think and Grow Rich. Another recommends the 48 Laws of Power. Another talks about learning new skills. In this type of environment, growth becomes contagious. This is virtù and fortuna working in practice. Virtù is the conscious choice of environment. Fortuna is the opportunities that arise when you are surrounded by constructive mindsets. Machiavelli also observed something very important. Leaders need to have their own loyal armies. In the modern context, this can be interpreted as a circle of people who share similar values. It doesn't mean living in isolation or coldly cutting off relationships. It means understanding that constant interaction shapes behavior. A strategic man observes his environment like a gardener observes the soil. If the soil is poor, the plant grows weak. If the soil is fertile, growth is natural. This principle also connects with the idea of the appearance of virtue and the calculated use of force. Sometimes the necessary force is not to confront someone directly, but simply to reduce proximity to environments that drain mental energy. And when a man begins to better select the people around him, something curious happens. He begins to perceive another dangerous impulse that often arises within himself: the desire for immediate revenge when someone harms him. There is an extremely human impulse that has destroyed reputations, careers, and even entire kingdoms: the urge to retaliate immediately when we are wronged. When someone betrays us, disrespects us, or tries to bring us down, the emotion that arises is intense. Instinct demands swift action, a harsh response, proportional revenge. But strategic men know that acting in that moment rarely produces intelligent results. Machiavelli observed that power does not belong to those who react first, but to those who react best. And reacting best often means waiting. This may seem strange at first glance because we live in a culture that glorifies quick responses and direct confrontations, but a policy guided by reality, not by ideals, reveals something clear. decisions made in anger almost always benefit the adversary. When someone manages to provoke your impulsive reaction, they gain control of the pace of the game. Consider a simple example from the professional world. A colleague tries to sabotage one of your projects or spread negative comments about you. The initial impulse would be to confront immediately, expose the person, create an open conflict. But this often generates a chaotic scenario where everyone loses. The strategic person observes first. They gather information, analyze the environment, understand the motivations involved. This behavior represents the calculated use of force. It doesn't mean passively accepting injustice. It means choosing the most effective moment to act. In many cases, the best response is to build such solid results that the attempted sabotage loses relevance. Great business leaders do this all the time. They don't respond to every public attack. They continue executing their strategies. This connects directly with virtù and fortuna. Virtù is the emotional discipline to not react impulsively. Fortuna is the opportunities that arise when you keep a cool head while others lose control. Another interesting aspect is that immediate revenge often creates more enemies than it solves. Machiavelli warned that a leader needs to avoid being hated because unnecessary enemies accumulate risks over time. A strategic man understands that reputation and influence are built slowly. Therefore, he makes decisions based on real human nature. He knows that people observe behavior under pressure. When someone demonstrates composure in the face of attacks, he conveys something powerful: control. And control is one of the most respected forms of social strength. In some cases, the best response to provocation is not revenge, it's silent growth. Because consistent success is often a much more forceful response than any momentary argument. And when a man understands this principle, he realizes something even deeper. Many battles that seem urgent today simply cease to matter when the game is viewed from a long-term perspective. Now stop for a moment and think honestly. How many of these traps have appeared in your own life? Perhaps in an argument where you responded in the heat of the moment. Perhaps when you felt the need to over-explain your decisions. Or when you sought approval from people who, deep down, didn't even know where they were going. The truth is that these traps are silent. They don't arrive announcing danger. They appear disguised as emotional impulses, a need for recognition, a desire to prove something to someone. And that's exactly why Machiavelli insisted so much on something fundamental: understanding human nature as it really is. Because a politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands that you observe your own behaviors with brutal honesty. Men who build true respect learn to master their own behavior first. They understand that power isn't about reacting to everything, explaining everything, or pleasing everyone. It's about knowing how to choose battles. It's about developing virtù and fortunus, inner skill, and the ability to seize external opportunities. It's about using calculated force, not impulsive force. And above all, about making decisions based on real human nature, not on the fantasy that everyone will act justly or rationally. When a man understands this, something profoundly changes in how he positions himself in the world. He stops chasing validation. He begins to build value silently. And curiously, when this happens, respect begins to emerge naturally. Now I want to ask you a direct question. Which of these traps have you noticed appearing most often in your life? Was it the need for approval? Was it reacting emotionally to provocations? Or perhaps the temptation of immediate revenge when someone tried to bring you down? Write it in the comments, because this reflection could be the first step in completely changing how you position yourself in the world. And if you want to continue learning about strategy, human behavior, and the ideas Machiavelli left about power, influence, and social intelligence, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Because here we will continue exploring exactly this type of knowledge that, honestly, almost no one teaches.